Shemai GTA fans, we have won the Dominator GTT in this week's prize ride challenge, which is pretty easy to do really, although it does take a while because you've got to win 10 races. So I'm going to take you through the customization. I'm going to try and do a bit of a restoration job on it to make it just like a GT500, and partial success on that. So this is this chapter, and the next chapter will be taking it through testing, pulling wheelies, test track, as well as racing. So do look at those and move along if you're not really interested in the restoration. So onwards with restoration then. I've done all the upgrades. I'm getting all those done with the transmission, the engine tuning, and the turbo to make sure it's at its peak. Also the brakes, you want to do those. Although with it being a vintage muscle car, it's going to be pretty weak on the brakes. So bear that in mind with your driving skills. Yeah. Um, it's a 60s, late 60s Mustang. And there's elements of a few different Mustangs, but the rear end looks like a 69 Mustang. And but you look at the liveries and the engine, it looks to me more like a 1967 um, Shelby GT500, as well as potentially a 302 Boss Mustang. I think the GT500 is the one that I would prefer, so I'm going to try and make it like that, but color-wise, this is a restoration job that I've been inspired by a chap called Beasley, who did a video. So top right is a GT500. That kind of pale green color, I can't quite get it to work though. This is like the that kind of yellow color, isn't it? But it's a yellow. It's not yellow at all. It's more like green. It's dew yellow. That's it. I think that's the nearest I'm going to get it. And the livery it comes with is terrible. It's nothing like what you'd get in a production car. But obviously it's something for a track, for someone who's well into that. I'm going to try and make it as much as I can like a production vehicle, as if it's a reproduction. But there are a few ways I fail. So, okay, chrome bumper. You've got to have a chrome bumper. These coloured bumpers, sure. I don't think they look great anyway. They certainly don't fit the time period of the vehicle whatsoever. So stick with the stock. And the engine as well, I kept that stock because although some of the coloured options are great, I think you need to keep with the big round carburetor because that's really most representative of what you would have bought back in the day. It's not. That's more like the GT500. It's not really the kind of carburetor of Boss 302 because that had a little scoop on the left-hand side of it. So I think it's only GT500 or other Mustang kind of options rather than a Bosch with the engine. We have intercoolers, but in fairness, you're only going to see that when you lift up the hood. And the rear lights, this is we're not doing the rear lights, but look at those. We could do a change in those. Stock exhaust is what I kept with because that's most like what I remember. Um, and similarly, the fenders, I think they just go ridiculous. I think you've got to stick stock if you're going to go for something classic, because that most looks like what you would have actually bought back in the day. Similarly with the lights, stick with the stock. I think the other ones are ridiculous for if you want to make a realistic Mustang. And I kept with the standard hood hatches because that's what you've got. That's what you would have had. You didn't used to have those drag pins with a car that you would have bought back in the 67. Or 69 maybe, but I'm going for the 67 option because there we go, the Sabre turbo hood. So this is what you'd want to make it look like a Shelby. So we're going to go with that, and I want to do a Shelby livery, but as you'll see, a bit stuck. So I've gone for the primary with a livery as well. So I did match up the secondary to the livery, but I didn't need to do that. Seats on the inside, you've got lots of modern looking seats, and for well, just stick stock basically with everything on the inside. I'm not too happy with the dashboard speedometer and that, but there really aren't any Shelby options that look anything like what you'd have. I suppose they look like a classic kind of period thing you'd get with a Mustang for sure. And similarly, I went with a half roll cage. I don't like the stripe, the bar across the window. That isn't really what you would have had. You would have just had the roll cage going across the top. So it's halfway. It's not brilliant, but I did want to put a roll cage in there, so that's what I've got. Here's the liveries. There are some pretty good ones. There are also some terrible ones. I was stuck between the double stripes. Double stripe is what you would have got if you'd have gone for the stripe option on a GT500. So I think I preferred this one with the lines. That was what I wanted to go for. But the problem was, and I wanted white as well, because the white went with the restoration with Beasley, and what his mate went for with what Bob went for. But this is what I've gone for. It's terrible. I've contradicted myself because that is a Boss 302 livery stripes. So I didn't want to go for that. I wasn't going to go for that. But when I went with this colour, I just looked at the double stripe and I thought, you know what? It's terrible. It's not really what I want to do because I want to go for a Shelby look. But I'm putting a Boss Mustang on it. And yeah, I failed there. Similarly with the louvers, you know, you did have those as an optional extra. You could have got the louvers. But with the restoration that I was looking at, it didn't have louvers, but I went for it anyway. At the end of the day, Bob was going for a restoration that was completely different. I've got a link of that restoration. It is excellent, well worth watching. The splitter, get rid of the splitter because that was not what you had on the Shelby 67. It was something that you'd have on a 69 Mustang. So for sure keep it on if you're going for that. But I didn't want to do that. Wheels. So I went from this. I produced all this from memory. I wasn't meticulous looking at the actual. I've seen that video a couple of times now, so I hoped that I remembered exactly what the wheels looked like. So we had the black wheels. Muscle car is the only choices I think you've had that look good for the period, and they're not those. So something chunky, basically. Something chunky is what you had. Maybe that. Dodman. I don't think that's exactly. I think there was one that was a better match. Now I've looked at it again, but for me it's good enough. Now we want custom tiles, not custard tiles. And with the drag radial atomic white, that's exactly what we're looking for. It's obviously not got the right names. It's not got a Dunlop or anything, but that's what we've got. Shame we can't change these tail lights. I really want to change those to make them into a Shelby, because they would have been the flat kind of singular reds, to either side with the big circle in the middle for the petrol cap hidden with the badge, with the Cobra Jet badge. Yeah, I mean, I like to think it's got a 428 police interceptor in it. I'm just saying things that I've learned here. Cobra Jet. You know, I hope it has got that, but I mean, it probably has actually. Looking at the performance of it, comparing to modern day cars, it's pretty good. The GT500 is what was made for drag racing, but it did perform pretty well on the track as well. So it wouldn't just have been about straight line performance, and I think it would have outperformed a Boss 302 for sure, with the extra horses under the bonnet. So let's take it for some wheelies, shall we? So you're out for a drive with your girlfriend or with your best buddy, Jake, for example. Not the same thing. You want to take it for a wheelie. It wheelies pretty well. So what I'm doing there, handbrake on, accelerator to the max, and then wait for the bonnet to rise. And as it reaches the peak, take the accelerator off and then put it back on again, pip it back on again quite quickly. And that'll hold your wheelie a lot longer, if that makes sense. And as you can tell, you can't see where you're going when you've got the internal view. But what a great car. What great wheelies that it can pull. And in a straight line, drag race, it beats a lot of cars doing this method. So, but on the track, it's a different story entirely. So let's try one more time. Let's just pop a final wheelie, and before we move on to a bit of track stuff. Oh dear. And we've rolled it. That's what the roll bar is for. What a shame on a classic car, eh? Right, I quickly threw on some low grip tyres just to see if it can drift, and I struggled to get it to drift, to be quite honest. It's nothing like last week's prize ride, the Futo for sure. But you take it into the corner, you throw it in, the accelerator off, you put the accelerator back on again, and nothing really. It's just a little bit of slight wheel spin. I'm not even sure if I'm getting a drift in here, to be quite honest. So yeah, straight on with the bulletproof tyres, and let's do the test track, shall we? So let's do a time trial, shall we? I like the way it handles for a few of these laps. It's quite nice. You get the braking right. The braking isn't as bad as what you'd think, although it has got sports braking that you'd expect with a GT500, so not as bad as your standard Mustang. I think that's a lot of this car. I really don't think it's just a bog standard '69 Mustang. Although the lights show, yeah, it's got those kind of lights. Although there's 5 of the lights, there should be 3, but we make our way around quite nicely. I found there was a bit of understeer at times, so a few of the laps I had to give up on because there's a little bit of a bump on that. But not too bad overall. It's a very solid kind of controlled experience, and here we are on the last straight. So that brings us 1 minute and 1 decimal 35, so it's above the Remus just about, so quite on a par with the Remus. Not as good as the S2, obviously it's not going to be as good as the Calico. Here we are, we're listening to a bit of the engine noise. It doesn't really sound like a Mustang, not one of the... It's not got the kind of the depth, the tenor of the Mustang whatsoever. It does sound like a muscle car, but I really like the way the pulleys move in the engine there, and the engine looks about right, but the sound isn't quite there, so that could be improved. Here she is in a race, so I pull a wheelie and that'll give me a boost start, so much like in a drag race, they take off but I catch them up easily. Now, one of the problems that you might have with this car is that it's not as solid as you might think, and it's very easy for other cars to push you around. Look at that, straight into the wall. This happened on a number of occasions. Actually, a couple of races it just happened at the start. I just got pushed into the wall. Yeah, it happens. But overall, it's a pretty good performer on the track. Not as obviously it's not as good as the Calico. It's not as good as the S2. They're going to beat you, but you could potentially get your gains when you're going from like the grass sections and the bumps to the road like that. Whereas the S2 is a bit more twitchy and you can lose it a bit. So you can just keep your foot down on the more bumpy sections as you go around the corners. But I think that gives you limited, not enough of an advantage really, compared to decent drivers really. So you really want to be racing against people who aren't as good as you, I think, unless they're driving similar vehicles, such as the Dominator again, or the other Dominator. But yeah, it's worth trying for sure. Try it on the track, see what you think. I think it is a pleasurable drive, but you do want to pick one of the tracks that are much more open than the more closed sections which involve more bends, because that's where you really make your gains, I think, on a nice open track. I mean, I have enjoyed racing the Dominator GTT, but the S2 just performs a lot better despite the twitchiness on the bumps there. So unfortunately I probably won't be racing it a great deal in races that I want to win or place ultimately. It's funny because I have seen other YouTuber reviews talking about the suspension, and I lowered it and I think it looks right. Notice how the back end is lower than the front end, just like you'd expect in a Shelby Mustang, so I think it's great. It's fine. But yeah, what are my concluding thoughts on this car then? You know, how does it perform? Well, we already know that it's not in the top end of performers on the racetrack, but in a drag race, it's great. You know, you can beat other cars just in a straight line drag race, which is kind of what these cars were all about back in the day. and although they did perform pretty good on the track as well, so it's a shame that we didn't see that kind of performance. But then again, it is representative of a 60s car. You wouldn't expect a late 60s car to be beating a modern car anyway on the track. So I suppose that's the element of realism. If anything, it's a bit unrealistic because the performance is too close to the Porsche GT3. So yeah, I'd say, is it worth it? Yeah, it's worth doing it as a prize ride, for sure. Definitely do those 10 races, place in the top 5 to win it as a prize ride. But it's a great car to drive as well. So it's not just about the racing. It looks great. So I think I will be getting this car out again. So would I pay around $1 million for this car? I don't think so, but I'd definitely buy it if it was on discount, for sure. But I would certainly, I have certainly done the 10 races, placing top 5, and it's well worth it. It only took me about an hour and a half to do. So it's a small price to pay. I mean, you could do a KO Perico heist, but I think racing is much more fun. The other thing is as well, if you want to make a Boss 302 or a Shelby Mustang, then this is the best option. You know, it's got the liveries, it's got the scoops, it's got the hoods. Hasn't got the tail lights, but you could make something Jerry Beasley might even be proud of. So yeah, I hope this video has helped. If it has, do like and subscribe, and give me some comments on what your thoughts are, what your Mustangs are like. And thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.